Welcome back. Now to the historic same-sex marriage hearings. The centre has urged the CJI-led Supreme Court Constitutional Bench to leave the issue of legislation to the Parliament as it hears the pleas seeking legal sanctity for same-sex marriage. Several petitioners have argued that right to love is an essential feature of free society and that certain basic rights are not subject to whims of the majority. The Supreme Court, on the other hand, has reminded the centre that society is evolving and questioned centre's assertion that the call for same-sex marriage legislation is an urban phenomenon. The Bar Council too has urged the court to leave the matter to the Parliament and has even said that over 99.9% of Indians are opposed to the idea of same-sex marriage. But they did not cite any data on such extrapolations. Now, Sweekar, a group representing parents of children from the LGBTQIA community, have sent an open letter to the Chief Justice, Justice Chandrachud. The letter states that they desire their children to find legal acceptance for their relationship under the Special Marriage Act. They also say that they hope to see the legal stamp on the rainbow marriages of their children within their lifetimes. And well, joining me now to take this discussion forward are two members of Sweekar. We have with us Aruna Desai, who is also the co-founder of the support group. Ashmit Garg also joins us. She's a member of Sweekar with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Ms. Desai, let me come to you first. Borrowing from the letter that is written to the Chief Justice, the letter says, "We empathize with those opposing same-sex marriage." That's interesting, coming from parents who are batting for same-sex marriages.
Yeah, I didn't get you.
Ms. Desai, that question was for you, that it's an interesting assertion being made in the letter to the CJI.
Yes.
The question that I'm asking is that it's interesting that you say that you empathize with those opposing you, whereas you're batting for same-sex marriages. Mrs. Desai, for you.
Yeah, so I just, that means, some of us also, some parents were there at that stage, because when their children came out, they never understood. They were into denial. So it took a lot of time for them also to understand. So when we are saying that, we empathize with those who don't understand, we educate and you will understand, That is what is the meaning of that.
Ms. Garg, same question to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Same question. In the letter, you're writing that you empathize with those batting against you. We've seen in the recent past that very sharp words have been used against the LGBTQ community, saying that this is an urban elitist phenomena. Yet you say that you empathize with those batting against you. Mrs. Garg.
Thanks, Ashmit. I think, the Sweekar group is very clear in its understanding, its ethos, and its, evolution as a parent group, because we have ourselves gone through this whole grind, and we realize that the journey to acceptance has many different phases. And it starts from a very abject denial of the fact that your child could be a non-binary or a queer child. And, it comes from the indoctrination that we have, ingrained in us as we grow up in a very tight, traditional society. But we do feel sympathy for these people because for two very specific reasons. One, with the writing down of the Section 377 by the Honorable Supreme Court in 2018, I think the Honorable Supreme Court has actually set the ball rolling. This now is going to have a very large cascade effect, and irrespective of what discussions we have, whether we have it in the Parliament or not, we are going to see this come to fruition where people are going to come out and do what they want to. Now, whether we have the legal stamp or not is something that is certainly desirable, but it does not stop you from being in a same-sex alliance. But there are other ways to go around the whole thing, because we want to see a legal stamp on this so that, there are no problems with regard to nomination, with regard to insurance, with regard to property issues, etc. I hope that comes around. But we feel sorry for those people who do not see the writing on the wall, who do not see how this will pan out. There have been countries who have come with very Puritan, Victorian ideas, and today almost all of the other countries that we see are, batting for same-sex marriage. Many of them have accepted that. And I think one of the major grouses that the other side has is that this is a very urban, elitist phenomena. And I would want to really place on record one very important thing, and that is there is absolutely no data. And when I say no data, there is no data with regard to how much sexual harassment queer children face in schools, whether they are able to get enough equitable opportunities while at work. And this data is very limited, and the last Ipsos report that came out in 2019 talked about a few things, about a few changes that were happening in the Indian community of queer people, but it does not really reflect the changes, the recent changes that have come about. Having said that...
Sure, Mrs. Garg. So you've touched upon a number of issues there. We'll try to address them one by one. Ms. Desai, let me come to you now. It's been 4.5 years since we had the Supreme Court striking down Section 377. Sweekar, the name of your organization, means acceptance. How far has this journey of acceptance come after the Supreme Court struck down Section 377?
Yeah, before that date, people used to feel, even children while coming out, they used to think whether their parents will accept or not. But from that time onwards, children felt, comfortable in coming out. The year after that, when we had Pride, their children never had put mask on their face. They openly came out. So it became easy, and it became even for the parents. They understood that this is not a crime, because Section 377, it was said that being gay is called criminal. So since that time, after that, we had many members. Suddenly the members increased after that, and during Corona increased 3 more. So it has become now even the young children are coming out and their parents are joining the group.
Sure, Mrs. Desai. So there seems to be a growing acceptance. Ms. Garg, let me take the same question to you. The one thing that is different, however, between Section 377 and same-sex marriage is the stance of the government. The government had left it open to the court to decide for Section 377. Here we have a government that is very explicitly stating that it is opposing hammer and tongs the idea of same-sex marriages.
Yeah, I think for those people who are batting against this, I think there are a couple of things that they really need to do. One is to go back to Hinduism and the history of Hinduism in India, where they will find one of the books that I can definitely refer to is Amara Das Wilhelm's Tritiya Prakriti, the third gender, where she talks about the 1st century CE, from when there is written evidence that the third gender had acceptance, acknowledgement, and were highly valued in the Indian society. So this is not new for us. This is not a Western concept for us. This is not something that has come from the West for us. So we must realize this. There are enough books written by Devdutt Patnaik ji, whom I really respect as an author and as an expert on Hinduism. And if one was to read about that, read those books, you will find n number of examples where we've had same-sex marriages, same-sex couples, and they have had children. King Dilip died. He had 2 wives. He died, and he left behind 2 wives who could not have any children. But then they had a child.
Garg, if I may interject there.
Yeah.
If I may just interject, what you're raising, of course, is the issue of need for more education. And that, in fact, I was speaking to one of the petitioners in this case, one of the leading lawyers in this case. The opinion that I got from that lawyer is that this Supreme Court judgment, in terms of granting the legal stamp without the conversations on the ground, without the education and communication on the ground, will not really amount to much. That's an apprehension that the lawyer had. Is that the same apprehension that you have, that the Supreme Court tomorrow may perhaps grant its approval, may grant its nod, but it may not get accepted on the ground? Is that an apprehension that you may have with respect to education and more communication?
feel that there should be more sensitization, more education, more awareness. That goes without saying. This is an evolving concept for many new parents, many children. But I also feel that with or without the acceptance, the legal stamp of approval, people will still continue to be in alliances. Of course, they may not have the legal stamp of marriage, but they will still go for it.
Right, Mrs. Desai, Mrs. Garg, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective. We hope to continue this conversation as the Supreme Court continues the hearing. The Supreme Court, of course, will continue hearing in this case. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. is when the 5-judge bench will resume hearing. But with that, it's a wrap on this edition of News Center. More news and updates will continue right here on CNBC TV 18.